Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, Advanced English Listening Practice topic name is English Podcast for Fluency. Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to help you get that analytical edge with complex topics. And today, we're tackling something I hear about all the time, especially for you listeners, pushing towards real fluency. You spend ages listening to English content, right? Maybe it's a dense report, a science doc, something pretty complex, and you feel good. You think, okay, I got the main idea, I got the gist.
Yeah, you get the overall picture. But then the moment comes when you actually need to use that information.
Exactly. You try to explain it, maybe tell a colleague or summarize it.
And all those critical details, the specific numbers, the name of that study, that really memorable story that made the whole point click, they've just vanished into thin air.
It's so frustrating.
It is. But look, it's usually not about having a bad memory. It's more about a gap in your listening strategy.
Right. We want you to get past just knowing what was said. We want you to really grasp the why behind it and how it's supported.
That's exactly our mission for this deep dive. We're talking about developing a kind of listening superpower, actively hunting for the examples and the evidence.
The unseen anchors. I like that.
Yeah, there would give arguments clarity, credibility. They make things stick. We want to show you how speakers, especially native English speakers, structure their arguments, how they signal that proof is coming.
So you can spot it.
So you can spot it, capture it in real time, and really transform yourself from just, passively hearing it to actively analyzing it.
Okay, so we'll be breaking down the structure, looking for those verbal cues.
The signposts, yeah. And we'll use some really vivid stories drawing from the U.S. context to make all these ideas really concrete for you.
All right, let's dive in. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit more. For someone aiming for advanced English, why is this focus on the nitty-gritty, the examples and proof so important? Isn't getting the main point enough sometimes?
Well, getting the main point is definitely the foundation. You can't skip that. But if you're aiming higher, like for professional discussions, academic work, the gist just isn't going to cut it. Examples and evidence, they're like the bridges. They take an abstract idea from theory land and plant it firmly in the real world. They show why an idea actually matters, how it connects to real life, to people's experiences.
So if you only remember the concept, you sound like you know the topic.
Right. But if you remember the proof, the specific example, or the data point, then you sound authoritative. You sound like you truly understand it on a deeper level.
I find that too. If I remember a specific story someone told to make a point, the main idea comes right back with it. It's almost like the story is a hook for the concept.
It absolutely functions like that. It's what we sometimes call a cognitive bridge. Our brain, they're just wired for stories, for concrete things, for sensory details, abstract concepts like regulatory oversight challenges or exponential technological growth. They're slippery. They don't have those natural hooks for our memory.
Especially when you're listening in a second language, right? Your brain's already working harder.
Precisely. The cognitive load is higher. So those abstract ideas, they can often just fall right out of your working memory almost instantly. The brain prioritizes the concrete stuff, the vivid stuff.
Makes sense. It needs something tangible.
Yeah. So the example gives you that immediate, tangible context. Think about that abstract idea we mentioned. Challenges of intergenerational communication.
Okay, yeah. Sounds pretty academic. Dry.
Exactly. It doesn't really mean much until the speaker gives you that concrete illustration, like the classic example.
The grandparent trying to understand TikTok.
Perfect example. Imagine the speaker painting that picture. You see the grandparent looking earnest but totally baffled by the fast cuts, the weird trends.
While the grandchild is just sighing, thinking, it's not that deep, Grandma.
Right. Suddenly, that abstract communication gap isn't academic anymore. It's this humorous, slightly frustrating scene you can visualize. You remember the image, maybe the generational slang difference, the feeling. And that sensory detail locks the abstract concept, intergenerational communication challenges, into your memory much more effectively.
Okay, so memorability is key. But what about, say, in a work meeting? You're trying to argue for a change. A story might help, but you probably need more, right?
Absolutely. And that brings us straight to the second huge value, credibility and persuasion. In almost any high-stakes setting in the U.S., think law, business, science, policy debates, you can't just state your opinion and expect people to accept it.
You need to back it up.
You have to back it up. Evidence is what turns your personal viewpoint, no matter how strongly you feel it, into something solid, something defensible. It shifts it from, this is what I think, to this is what the facts suggest.
Okay, so let's take a claim like social media is bad for mental health. How does that transform with evidence?
Well, the general claim is okay as a starting point. But Compare that to a recent large-scale university study found that teenagers averaging 3 or more hours daily on social media platforms are 30% more likely to report significant symptoms of anxiety and depression compared to peers using it less.
Wow. Okay. That's much more specific.
It is. And when you, as the advanced listener, catch those details, the 30%, the 3-hour mark, the mention of a university study, you're not just hearing an opinion anymore. You're actively assessing the weight of the argument. How strong is the foundation for this belief?
And I guess this whole process, actively listening for the proof, must also sharpen your critical thinking skills. That seems really valued in U.S. culture education.
It's absolutely fundamental. It's the gateway to critical analysis. When you shift from passively receiving the sound to actively hunting for the evidence, you become an evaluator. You start asking those crucial questions almost automatically. Is this evidence actually relevant? Is the source credible? Is it biased? Did the speaker maybe leave out counterexamples that don't fit their narrative?
Right.
So it's not just about understanding more deeply. It's about preparing yourself to engage intelligently, to challenge, to question, maybe even build upon the argument using the very details the speaker provided. It makes you a much more sophisticated participant in the conversation.
Okay, so we know why we need to capture the proof. But how do we do it in the moment? When someone's talking at native speed, how do we even know the proof is coming? How do we switch into that evidence hunting mode?
That's where the speaker's auditory map comes in. Think of it like verbal signposts. English speakers use these little phrases, these chunks of language that signal, okay, we're taking a brief exit off the main highway of the argument to show you the evidence.
Ah, like a little indicator.
Yeah, exactly. Recognizing these lets you consciously shift your focus, anticipate what's coming.
Okay, so let's break them down. What are some common signposts, for examples? The ones that basically say, let me show you what I mean.
Well, you've got the classics, obviously. For example,
Right.
for instance, everyone knows those. But listen for the slightly more formal ones, too, especially in presentations or lectures. Things like, to illustrate this point, or maybe to give you a better idea, sometimes to illustrate with a specific case. These tell you a concrete picture is coming.
What about the more engaging ones, like in talks or persuasive stuff?
Yeah, those often use commands to pull you in visually. Listen for things like, imagine this scenario, or picture this, or even just think about.
Right.
And in business or analysis, you'll often hear very direct pointers. Take the case of company X, or let's look at the situation in place name. When you hear those, that's your cue. Zone in on the specific name or place that follows. That's the anchor for the example.
Okay, that makes sense for examples.
Yeah.
Now, what about the signposts for harder evidence? Like data, stats, expert opinions, the markers that say, here's the solid proof.
These are crucial because they signal credibility is about to be established.
Yeah.
You really need to train your ear for attribution. Don't just hear studies show. Listen for who did the study. Phrases like, according to source name, maybe, according to the latest report from the Census Bureau, or as Dr. Expert Name at Institution pointed out. Capturing the source name and their affiliation is key for evaluating it later.
Got it. And for the research findings themselves?
Listen for the verbs that frame the data. Studies show, research indicates, the data suggests, a recent survey found. Sometimes speakers emphasize it more strongly. The numbers don't lie, or this is clearly evident in.
So when you hear those, brace yourself for numbers or findings.
Exactly. Prepare your brain, or your pen if you're taking notes, to grab those specifics, the percentage, the year, the dollar amount.
Now, arguments aren't always straight lines, right? People present evidence, but then maybe they bring up a counter-argument or a different angle. How do we spot those shifts?
Yeah, recognizing those pivots is vital for really understanding the nuances. If a speaker has been laying out all the positive evidence, they'll often signal a shift with contrast words.
Right.
Like, on the other hand, or conversely, or the classic, however, sometimes it's more explicit. However, we also need to consider, but if we look at it from another perspective,
Okay.
recognizing these tells you, okay, hold on, we're changing direction now. Prepare for evidence that might actually challenge what was just said. It shows the speaker is engaging in more complex critical thinking.
So if you had to give one key tip for listeners when they hear any of these signposts, example, evidence, contrast, what's the most important thing to do in that split second?
It's about proactive integration. The moment you hear that signpost, for instance, according to, on the other hand, you have that tiny window to mentally shift gears.
From listening for the general idea.
To listening specifically for the support. What's the name? What's the number? What's the core of the story?
Yeah.
You consciously prepare to capture that specific piece of information. It stops the crucial details from just washing over you while you're still processing the main claim.
All right, we've got the signposts. We know what to listen for. Now let's really dig into what we're listening for. This feels like the core of it, the different types of prose speakers use.
Absolutely. And we're going to explore the 6 major forms you'll encounter constantly in American English communication. Understanding these different types helps you see the speaker's strategy.
And we'll use those detailed USA-based stories to make them really stick.
Exactly. Let's start with the first one, which is probably the most common in everyday talk. Hashtags tag 3.1, anecdotes, personal stories, relatability.
Okay, anecdotes, personal stories, these are all about making a connection, right? Humanizing things, like that Silicon Valley entrepreneur talking about failure.
Precisely. The main claim might be something abstract, like embracing failure is key to innovation. That's fine, but it doesn't resonate deeply until you hear the story.
So the story provides the emotional weight.
It does. The entrepreneur needs to convey the reality of failure, not just the concept. So she might start, oh man, I remember hitting rock bottom with our first startup. It was this social media app for dog owners.
Okay, I can already picture it.
Right. She sets the scene. We'd poured 2 years, all our savings, investor money into this thing. We were convinced it was the next big thing. She describes the late nights, the hope, then the crushing realization that nobody really wanted it. Users preferred Instagram for their dog pics.
Ouch. So the story captures that feeling of hitting a wall.
Yes, the despair. Maybe she talks about the awful meeting where she had to tell the team it's over. But then comes the crucial part of the anecdote, the pivot, the lesson learned.
The turnaround.
Exactly. She explains that while sorting through the wreckage, they realized one piece of tech they built internally, an image recognition algorithm specifically trained to identify dog breeds, actually worked incredibly well.
So the failure wasn't a total loss. It revealed something valuable.
That's the core message embedded in this story. The failure forced them to see their real strength wasn't the app idea, but the underlying AI. She then describes the next tough phase, scrapping the app, pivoting hard, rebuilding as a B2B company, selling that visual search tech to e-commerce sites.
And the punchline.
The punchline is that that company, born from the ashes of the failed dog app, is now valued at, say, over $1 billion. So when you listen, you're not just hearing failure is good, you're hearing the narrative arc. Despair, analysis, discovery, pivot, massive success. The emotional cues and the explicit lesson, biggest failure, led to biggest success. That's what makes the abstract point about embracing failure unforgettable. Hashtag tag 3.2, case study specific incidents, real world analysis.
Okay, so anecdotes are personal, emotional. What about case studies? They feel more objective, like a deep dive into one specific situation, like that urban planner in Detroit you mentioned.
Exactly. Case studies provide that detailed real-world analysis. The planner's main point might be that top-down bureaucratic city planning often fails where community-led initiatives succeed.
So they need a specific example to prove that.
Right, and they use the Green Alley project in Midtown Detroit. The power here is in the comparison and the specific details. First, they establish the problem with the old way.
How did the top-down approach fail?
The speaker might describe how, historically, the city would come in, maybe pave an alley, install some lights. Big contracts looked good initially, but there was no local buy-in, no long-term care. So pretty soon, the neglect would creep back in. It was just a transaction.
Okay.
Then they contrast this sharply with the Midtown Detroit case. Here, the key figure is a local resident. Let's call her Maria Rodriguez.
Giving a specific name makes it more real.
It does. Maria didn't wait for the city. She organized her neighbors, formed a block club, went out and found small grants, maybe from local foundations. She mobilized volunteers.
So the proof is in how it happened, grassroots up.
Precisely. The case study goes into the specifics of what they did. Maybe they replaced cracked concrete with permeable pavers to handle rain, planted native rain gardens, got local artists to paint murals. Very specific interventions.
And the results? What's the hard evidence the planner uses?
That's crucial. The speaker needs to show measurable outcomes. They'll state things like, within 18 months, according to the local real estate data, property values on the streets bordering that alley increased by an average of 7%. Or, police reports showed that minor crime incidents in the alley dropped to virtually zero. Maybe local cafes reported more foot traffic.
Got it. Specific names, location, actions, and quantifiable results.
Yes. Maria Rodriguez is Midtown Detroit, permeable pavers, 7% value increase, zero crime. Those specifics make the case study compelling proof that community ownership really drives sustainable change, far better than the old top-down way. Hashtag 3.3 statistics data, objective support.
Okay, moving from stories and specific cases to the cold, hard facts, statistics. These seem designed to provide objective weight, maybe even shock the listener a bit, like that public health advocate in Texas.
Definitely. Stats are powerful anchors for objective proof. The advocate's goal is likely to show that ignoring public health isn't just bad for people, it's bad economics. They need numbers to make that case undeniable.
So they'd start by establishing the scale of the problem.
Exactly. They might hit you with a stark figure right away. Look, obesity rates here in Texas have climbed by 15% in just the last decade. That sets the trend in the time frame.
15%. Okay, that gets your attention. But the real impact is often the cost, right?
Absolutely. The next step is quantifying the burden. And this epidemic is costing Texas taxpayers an estimated $5.8 billion every single year. That huge specific number, $5.8 billion, connects the health issue directly to everyone's wallet.
So you need to catch the percentage, the time frame, and the dollar amount.
Yes, 15%. Last decade, $5.8 billion. Without those anchors, the problem feels vague. With them, it's a concrete crisis.
But just stating the problem isn't usually enough, is it? Good use of stats often points to a solution, too.
That's the critical next step, pivoting to the policy solution, backed by more data. The advocate might say, but there's good news. A joint study by the CDC and researchers at the University of Texas found something remarkable.
Citing credible sources, CDC, University of Texas.
Crucial for credibility. Their research shows that for every single dollar, we invest in proven, community-based preventative health programs.
Oh, okay, here comes the payoff.
We see a return on investment of between $3 and $5 in reduced healthcare expenditures over the next 5 years. Boom.
Wow, so $1 in saves $3 to $5 later?
Exactly. See how the statistics build the argument? Problem, 15% rise, $5.08 cost me to cents once. Solution backed by ROI, $1 saves $5. The numbers transform it from a plea, we should be healthier, into an undeniable economic argument. Investing in health saves us money. Your listening focus has to be sharp on those specific numerical values and who generated them. Hashtag tag 3.4 expert testimony quotes lending authority.
All right, so we've had stories, cases, stats. What about quoting experts? This seems like borrowing someone else's credibility, like the political analyst talking about a Supreme Court decision.
Precisely. Expert testimony or quoting a recognized authority instantly lends weight to your argument. The analyst's point might be that a particular Supreme Court ruling seems more based on politics than law. That's a strong claim.
So they need backup from someone respected within that system.
Exactly. They need a voice of authority. So they might bring in a quote from a well-regarded justice, maybe someone known for sharp legal reasoning, like Justice Elena Kagan.
Okay. How will they introduce that?
It needs to sound formal, emphasizing the source's credentials. Something like, and this point was powerfully articulated by Justice Elena Kagan in her dissenting opinion on that case. She wrote, and I quote,
setting it up clearly.
Yes. And then the quote itself needs to be impactful, directly supporting the analyst's argument. Maybe Kagan wrote something like, the court today, regrettably, appears to have substituted its own policy preferences for careful legal reasoning, undermining decades of established precedent.
That phrase, substituted its own policy preferences, that's the key bit, isn't it? It directly echoes the analyst's point about politics over law.
That's exactly why it's chosen. It encapsulates the entire critique in the authoritative words of a justice. The analyst isn't just saying, I think the court got it wrong. They're effectively saying, a respected legal mind on the court itself identified this very flaw.
So as a listener, I need to catch the expert's name, their title or credential, justice, and that core phrase from the quote that does the heavy lifting for the argument.
Exactly. Name, credential, and the crucial snippet of the quote. That's the essence of using expert testimony effectively. Hashtag tag 3.5, analogies, metaphors, making the complex accessible.
Okay, next up, analogies and metaphors. These feel like tools for explaining really tricky stuff by comparing it to something familiar, like trying to explain quantum physics using baseball. Seriously.
Yeah, it sounds unlikely, but analogies are incredibly powerful for bridging the gap between complex, abstract ideas and everyday understanding. Quantum mechanics, with things like superposition and the observer effect, it's notoriously counterintuitive.
Definitely not something you grasp easily.
Right. So how does a science educator make sense of it without equations? They find a relatable comparison. The core idea they might want to explain is that tiny quantum particles can exist in multiple states at once, superposition, until they're measured or observed.
Okay, so how does baseball fit in?
They might compare that unobserved quantum particle to a baseball after it's pitched, but before the batter hits it or the catcher catches it.
Okay, the ball's in motion.
Right. And the educator emphasizes, if no one's precisely tracking it, in a weird theoretical sense, that ball is in a state of potential motion. It could curve left, could go straight, could drop slightly. All those possibilities exist simultaneously in that brief moment.
So the potential motion is like the particle's superposition state.
Exactly. That's the link. Then the observation, the bat hitting the ball, the catcher's mitt stopping it. That's the interaction that forces the ball to choose a single definite state or trajectory. It's no longer potentially curving, it did curve, or it did go straight.
So the analogy makes a weird quantum idea, observation collapses possibilities into one reality, feel a bit more intuitive by linking it to the familiar action of hitting or catching a ball.
Precisely. It simplifies the mechanism without distorting the core concept too much. When you're listening to an analogy, you need to identify the two things being compared, the quantum particle and the baseball in flight, and clearly grasp how the comparison works. What's the shared principle? In this case, it's the idea that interaction or observation resolves uncertainty into a definite state. Hashtag 3.6, hypothetical scenarios, exploring consequences.
Okay, last one. Hypothetical scenarios. These are the what-if situations, right? Seems like something a financial advisor would use to show the impact of decisions, like that retirement planning example in Florida.
Exactly. Hypotheticals are fantastic for illustrating potential consequences, making future risks or rewards feel much more immediate and real. The financial advisor's challenge is often overcoming inertia, getting people to start saving now.
So they need to show the cost of delay.
Precisely. Their claim is, time is your most valuable asset in investing. To prove it, they need concrete numbers that show the difference starting early makes. They don't just say start early, they show you why.
So they'd paint a picture of the ideal scenario first.
Right. They set the baseline. Okay, let's imagine scenario one. We have a 25-year-old.
Yeah.
You start putting aside just $200 a month, very achievable. And let's assume a reasonable average market return, say 7% per year, if they do this consistently until they're 65.
Okay, $200 a month, 7%, starting at 25.
By age 65, thanks to the power of compounding over 40 years, they could realistically be looking at a nest egg of over $500,000. $500,000. That's the potential reward for starting early.
$500,000 from just $200 a month. Okay, that's impressive. Now comes the contrast, the cost of waiting.
This is where the hypothetical hits hard. Now, scenario two, same person, same $200 a month, same 7% growth, but they wait just 10 years. They start at age 35 instead of 25.
Only a 10-year delay. How much difference could that make?
It's brutal. Because they miss those crucial first 10 years of compounding growth. By age 65, they end up with less than $250,000.
Wow. Less than half, just from waiting 10 years.
Exactly. That 10-year delay cost them literally $250,000 in potential retirement savings. The hypothetical makes the abstract concept of compounding interest painfully tangible. It's not just advice anymore. It's a clear, quantified consequence.
So listening to a hypothetical, you need to grab the starting conditions, the key difference between the scenarios, like the start age, and the dramatically different outcomes, $500 $250K.
That's it. The initial setup, the variable that changes, and the clear numerical impact. That's the power of the hypothetical scenario.
Okay, we've got these 6 types of proof. Anecdotes, case studies, stats, quotes, analogies, hypotheticals, we know what they look like. But finding and capturing them while someone's talking fast still feels like a challenge. What are some practical strategies for this hunt for proof?
It really helps to prepare beforehand, even just mentally. That's the first strategy. Pre-listening anticipation. Before the talk starts, or even just based on the title or who the speaker is, try to guess what kind of support they're likely to use.
So if it's a scientist presenting research,
you anticipate data, statistics, maybe citations of other studies. If it's a motivational speaker,
probably more anecdotes, maybe hypotheticals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or a historian. Expect case studies, quotes from primary sources. Just having that expectation primes your brain. You're already sort of scanning for those types of evidence.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, during the actual listening, note-taking is tough in a second language. If I try to write down every detail of that Detroit Alley project, I'll miss the next point completely.
For sure. You absolutely cannot write everything. The key is efficient shorthand. This is personal. You develop your own system, but the goal is ruthless efficiency. Forgetful sentences.
Use symbols, abbreviations.
Yes, whatever works for you. Maybe AN for anecdote, CS for case study, stat, or even just hashtag for statistics, Q, or Bury for a quote. For hypothetical with semanal, for consequence or result. For that Detroit example, your entire note might just be CS Detroit Green Alley, Maria R, base of Primio Pave, Gardens base of Maturo plus 7% prop foul, 0 crime.
Ah, okay. Just the absolute key anchors.
Exactly. Name, place, main action, key results. It captures the essence without bogging you down.
All right, so you've anticipated, you've taken minimalist notes. What happens after the talk? How do you make sure you've actually integrated this proof?
That's post-listening evaluation, and it's where the learning really cements. First, can you recall the key support points just from your notes? Can you connect the 7% property value increase back to the Green Alley project without looking it up?
Testing your capture and recall.
Right. Second, and crucially, can you explicitly link that piece of support back to the main argument it was supposed to prove? Why did the speaker tell the dog app story? Oh yeah, to prove that failure can lead to unforeseen success through pivoting. Making that connection explicit in your mind is vital.
And then there's the critical evaluation part, especially with so much information flying around.
Yes. This is about judging credibility. Was that statistic about social media and anxiety from a peer-reviewed journal or just some random blog? Was the anecdote about the successful entrepreneur typical or a 1 in a million outlier story? You need to apply that layer of healthy skepticism. Is this proof strong? Is it representative? Is the source reliable?
Okay, those are great strategies, but let's be real, we all fall into traps when listening intently. What are some common pitfalls for advanced learners trying to nail down this evidence?
Oh, definitely. The biggest one I see is what I call the rabbit hole trap. You're listening to a really engaging anecdote, like that Silicon Valley story. The details are vivid, the narrative is compelling.
And you get totally sucked into the story itself.
Exactly. You're following the ups and downs, the dog breeds, the billion-dollar valuation. And then the story ends, and you realize you've completely forgotten the point the story was supposed to illustrate. What was the main claim again?
Yeah, I can see that happening easily. What's the fix?
Constant mental recentering. As soon as the anecdote or example finishes, consciously ask yourself, okay, why did they tell me that? What main idea does this support? Just take that half second to reconnect the example to the argument.
Okay, what's another common trap?
Kind of the opposite, passive acceptance. This is where you successfully capture the piece of evidence. Maybe you even note down the statistic, $5.8 billion cost of obesity in Texas.
Right, you got the fact.
You got the fact, but you accepted it without any critical filter. You didn't register who said it, or you didn't pause to think, is that calculation based on solid methodology? Could there be other factors? You just absorb the number as truth.
So not enough skepticism.
Not enough healthy skepticism.
Yeah.
The solution is to cultivate that habit of quickly evaluating the source and the likely reliability of the evidence as you hear it. Don't just capture, critique.
Makes sense. One more.
The last big one is ignoring the so what. This happens when you remember the details, maybe even the source, but you miss the significance or the implication of the evidence. You might recall, okay, the advisor said waiting 10 years costs you $250,000. You remember the numbers. But if you don't connect that to the advisor's core message, the immense financial power of starting early and the devastating cost of procrastination, then the numbers are just trivia. You miss the so what, the reason the speaker shared that hypothetical.
So you need to constantly link the detail back to its purpose in the argument.
Always. Why does this detail matter? What does it prove or illustrate? The $250 difference means delay is incredibly expensive. The 7% property value increase means community efforts work. Always make that final connection.
We've used American examples throughout this, which has been really helpful. Let's explicitly connect this back to the goal many listeners have, really mastering communication in the U.S. context. Why is this skill of listening for examples and evidence particularly crucial here?
There are a few key reasons, I think. First and foremost is the nature of what you might call the dominant argumentative culture, especially in academic and professional settings.
What do you mean by argumentative culture?
Well, there's a very strong emphasis on evidence-based reasoning. You're generally expected to show your work, so to speak, in a university seminar, in a business proposal, even in many news analyses. Simply stating your position isn't enough. You're expected to support it with facts, data, case studies, expert opinions.
So if you can't track and recall that support when you're listening, you're kind of locked out of the deeper conversation.
Pretty much. You can follow the surface, but you can't really engage in the debate or critically evaluate the arguments being made if you haven't grasped the evidence underpinning them. It's almost baked into the way arguments are structured.
Okay. What else makes it important specifically in the U.S.?
The sheer diversity and volume of media. You're constantly bombarded with information from countless sources, news outlets, blogs, social media, podcasts, documentaries.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
It is. And the quality varies wildly. Being able to quickly listen for credible evidence, is that a solid study or just someone's opinion? Is that anecdote representative or just designed to pull heartstrings? Becomes a crucial filtering skill. It helps you navigate that flood and discern what's actually well-supported versus what's just persuasive noise.
That makes a lot of sense. You need to be able to separate the signal from the noise, and the evidence is often the signal.
Exactly. And related to that, think about how powerful storytelling and personal anecdotes are in American culture, in business pitches, TED Talks, even political speeches.
The narrative is huge.
It is. And that's great. Stories connect us. But this listening skill allows you to appreciate the story, feel the emotional connection, while also critically assessing the factual basis, if any, that accompanies it. You can engage both heart and mind.
So you're not just swayed by a good story, you're also checking if it's backed by substance.
Right. It's about becoming a discerning consumer of information. Ultimately, listening for evidence is the first step toward critical thinking, which is highly valued.
Yeah.
It's about analyzing information objectively rather than just passively accepting it. Mastering this doesn't just improve your comprehension, it gives you a much richer, more nuanced understanding of how communication works in the U.S., both the language and the cultural expectations around proof. Hashtag penis outro.
Wow, okay. This has been a really deep dive, hasn't it? We started talking about that common frustration. You listen to something complex in English, get the main idea, but then all the important details just evaporate. But now, hopefully, you feel equipped with a new framework. We've talked about actively hunting for those unseen anchors, the stats, the stories, the quotes that really give arguments their strength and make them stick.
Yeah, the goal is to move past just surface-level understanding. You're not just passively receiving anymore. You're starting to analyze the very structure of the argument, the foundation it's built on.
It really feels like a skill that empowers you not just to remember more, but to evaluate the quality of what you're hearing and engage more confidently.
Absolutely. It lets you become a much more sophisticated participant in any English conversation or discourse.
So we really encourage you listening to put these strategies into practice right away. The very next time you're listening to something substantial in English, a news report, a lecture, maybe even just a detailed explanation from a colleague.
Take that extra second. Consciously pause and ask yourself, what's the specific anchor here? Is it a number, a name, a story, a quote? What specific piece of information is holding this claim up?
Hunt for those signposts we talked about.
Evaluate the proof you find. And just watch. See how your comprehension starts to deepen, how the information starts to stick in a whole new way. It can be pretty transformative.
And end of this episode, must mention, like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's deep dive. Advanced English listening practice topic name is Why We Miss Words When Listening in English. You know, we've all had that moment, right? You're really tuned in, listening hard in English. Maybe it's a meeting or a film or just chatting, and then bam, a word just disappears. Or maybe a whole phrase. It's like, oh, like your brain just hit skip. Suddenly there's this gap, this blank space in your understanding, and it's incredibly frustrating. You're nodding, trying to keep up, but inside you're thinking, wait, what did they just say? It happens to pretty much everyone learning English, even at advanced levels. So today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly why this happens, our mission. To take that frustration and turn it into, well, a practical roadmap for getting better at listening. Because usually it's not about your hearing or even not knowing enough words. It's actually this really complex mix of how language works, how our brains process things, and sometimes even, how we feel psychologically. We want to give you the tools to figure out what's going on so you can build up that resilience and really start understanding clearly.
That's a great way to put it. And I think the first step really is to appreciate that listening isn't passive. It's not just sound washing over you. It's actually one of the most active, mentally demanding things our brain does. It's like conducting a symphony, coordinating all these different neural processes just to make sense of speech in real time, converting noise into meaning, understanding pitch, volume, context, intent. It's all happening incredibly fast all at once.
Okay, let's get into that. Let's unpack the machinery, as you said, because to fix the problem, we need to understand how comprehension is supposed to work first, right? What really struck me is just how many layers there are. It's not one step. It's like a whole sequence happening in split seconds.
Exactly. It's a multi-stage cognitive effort happening incredibly rapidly. And if any single one of those stages falters or slows down, that's when words get missed. The whole chain breaks. So first off, you've got acoustic processing. That's the ears doing their job, capturing the raw sound waves, pitch, loudness, the quality of the sound.
Okay, basic sound capture.
Right. Your temporal lobe turns those vibrations into electrical signals the brain can understand, basically distinguishing speech from, say, background noise.
Got it. So the brain knows something was said. What's next?
Next up is phonological processing. This is where the brain starts identifying the individual speech sounds, the phones, like the B sound, the A sound, the T sound in bat. It compares these incoming sounds to this huge library of sounds it knows exist in English. This is also where things like understanding different accents start to come into play, recognizing those subtle variations.
Oh, okay. So it's matching the raw sound to known English sounds.
Precisely. Then comes lexical access. The string of sounds identified, like bait, gets matched to words in your mental dictionary, your lexicon. And what's really fascinating here is the speed. The brain doesn't just find one match. It often activates several potential candidates almost instantly. Hearing cane might briefly bring up can, candle, candy.
Wow. Okay. So it pulls up a few options, like a quick mental search. That must use up some brain power.
Oh, absolutely. It's resource intensive. And while that's happening, the next process is already kicking off, syntactic processing. As words are recognized, the brain immediately starts figuring out the grammar. Is this word a subject, a verb, an object? How do they fit together? Building the sentence structure.
Like finding the scaffolding of the sentence.
Exactly. And once the structure is somewhat clear, we move to semantic processing. This is extracting the literal meaning. Okay, we have the words, we have the grammar. What does this sentence actually mean on a basic level?
And that's not even the final step, is it? There's still the whole context thing.
That's the top layer, pragmatic processing. This is crucial. It's interpreting that literal meaning within the bigger picture. What's the speaker's intent? Are they being sarcastic? Is this a formal instruction or a casual suggestion? What cultural nuances are at play? This connects the words to the real world.
So it's constantly moving between these levels.
Yes, and critically, it's interactive and predictive. Your brain isn't just passively receiving, it's constantly guessing, forming hypotheses about what's coming next based on what it's heard so far. If any of these stages hiccups, maybe you mishear a sound, or retrieving the word meaning is slow, or the grammar confuses you, or you miss the context, the brain's prediction fails. And that's when you get that feeling of a word just vanishing. It didn't register properly at one of these crucial stages.
Right. This is where it gets super interesting for me, because often the word we miss isn't some obscure vocabulary item. It's a word we know perfectly well. The issue isn't the definition. It's that spoken English doesn't sound like written English, does it? It's not neat little words separated by spaces.
Not at all. It's more like a continuous stream, a kind of acoustic soup, as you said earlier. And this is probably the biggest hurdle for many learners, connected speech. Think about it. If we pronounced every single sound clearly, conversations would take way longer. We naturally smooth things out for efficiency, but that efficiency comes at the cost of clarity for the listener sometimes.
So how does that actually work? How do the sounds change?
Well, there are several key processes. One is elision, which basically means sounds get dropped, especially between words. Think about next door. Do you really hear that T sound clearly? Often it sounds more like next door. Or fax becoming fax. The T just disappears to make it easier to say.
Like rock and roll, the D is gone.
Exactly. Or the word and often just becomes N, or even just N. Fish and chips. If your brain is listening for the full word and, it might miss that tiny sound completely.
Right, because you learned it as A and D, pronounced clearly.
Precisely. Then there's assimilation. This is when a sound changes to become more like a neighboring sound, makes the transition smoother for the speaker, like 10 bags, say it quickly, often sound like 10 bags. The N sound, made with the tongue near the front, changes to an M sound, made with the lips, because the next sound, B, is also made of the lips.
Okay, I can hear that.
Or a really common one, did you? It almost always becomes didja. That D and J sound blend together. Again, if you're listening for two distinct words, did and you, didja can just fly past you.
It sounds like one weird word instead of two familiar ones.
Yeah. And related to that is liaison or linking. This is where sounds are joined together across word boundaries, especially a consonant sound at the end of one word linking to a vowel sound at the start of the next, like pick it up. Native speakers often say it like pick it up. Those sounds blend smoothly.
So the listener's job is to somehow chop that continuous stream back into individual words.
Exactly. Segmentation.
Yeah.
And these connected speech features make that segmentation really, really challenging.
Okay, so sounds get dropped, changed, linked. What else? You mentioned rhythm earlier.
Ah, yes. Reductions and weak forms. This is huge in English because it's a stress-timed language. This means we tend to put emphasis or stress on the important words, nouns, main verbs, adjectives, adverbs, the content words, and we kind of rush through or compress the less important ones.
Grammar words.
Yeah, the function words, articles like a, the, prepositions like to, oof, a, auxiliary verbs like can't, have, a. They carry grammar, but not the main meaning. In fast speech, these are almost always reduced, often down to the schwa sound, that neutral oo sound. It's the most common sound in English for a reason.
Like, I want to go.
Right. It becomes, I want to go, or a cup of tea becomes a cup of tea. What do you think becomes, what do you think?
And if you're expecting the full of or do you, you just miss it.
You miss it completely. Your brain doesn't register that super quick, weak sound as a word you learned. And missing those little words can really mess up your understanding of the sentence structure, even if you get the main nouns and verbs.
That's a really key point. It's not just about missing meaning, but missing the grammatical glue.
Absolutely. And then there's stress itself, where you put the stress in a word can change its meaning, like present, a gift, versus present, to give something. But also sentence stress changes the focus. I didn't steal your wallet means something different from I didn't steal your wallet. If you misinterpret the speaker's intended stress, you might misunderstand their main point.
And of course, the elephant in the room, accents.
Accents and dialects, definitely. If you've mainly learned, say, standard American English, hearing a British accent that drops the R sounds, pak the ka, or an Australian accent with different vowel sounds, can make even familiar words sound completely alien at first.
That momentary confusion.
Can be just enough to make you miss the next few words while your brain tries to catch up.
And finally, those really subtle sound differences.
Minimal pairs. Yeah, English has lots of words that differ by only one tiny sound, like ship and sheep, or thin and fine. If your native language doesn't make that distinction, or you haven't trained your ears specifically for it, it's very easy to mishear or just fail to identify the word altogether.
Wow. Okay, so just dealing with the sounds of natural spoken English is like navigating an obstacle course.
It really is. It's acoustic gymnastics.
Okay, let's say we miraculously overcome the sound challenges. We hear the words correctly segmented. The battleground then shifts to meaning, right? And again, what's surprising is that even words we know can cause problems. This takes us into lexical semantic challenges.
Right. The most obvious one, of course, is just unfamiliar vocabulary. If you simply don't know the word, that's a dead end. It acts like a roadblock. Your brain stops, tries to guess from context, maybe replays the sound, and while it's doing that, the speaker has moved on. You fall behind. Too many unknown words, and the whole thing just collapses.
That makes sense. But what about words we do know?
That's where the ambiguity tax comes in. English is full of words with multiple meanings. Polysemy. Think about the word bank, riverbank, financial bank, or right, correct, direction, a privilege, or set. I think it has hundreds of dictionary definitions.
Hundreds. Wow.
Yeah. So every time you hear a word like that, your brain has to hold multiple possibilities in mind for a split second, waiting for the context to clarify which meaning is intended.
And that takes effort. It slows things down.
Absolutely. It puts a load on your working memory. If the context isn't immediately clear, or if the context itself is ambiguous, your brain might guess wrong. You might interpret, he went to the bank as the financial institution, but maybe the story was about fishing. You then misunderstand the rest, maybe feeling like you missed a crucial word later when actually you just picked the wrong meaning earlier.
I see. And that applies to words that sound the same too, like see and see.
Exactly. Homophones. They're. Your brain has to use context to pick the right one instantly.
Okay, so ambiguity is a big one. What else trips us up meaning-wise?
Non-literal language. This is a huge category. Idioms, phrasal verbs, slang.
Stuff where the meaning isn't just the sum of the parts.
Precisely. If someone says, he finally kicked the bucket, and you try to picture someone literally kicking a pail, it makes no sense.
Right. Your brain hits a wall.
A mental wall, exactly. Because the meaning, he died, isn't derivable from kick and bucket. The whole phrase acts like one single opaque vocabulary item. If you haven't learned that specific phrase, it's as good as an unknown word.
And phrasal verbs are notorious for this, aren't they? Look up, put up with, get over.
They really are. Does look up mean search for information or raise your eyes? Does take off mean remove clothing or an airplane departing? Context is key, but you also need to have learned the specific phrasal verb unit.
Okay, and speed is a factor too, even if we know the word.
Definitely. Speed and retrieval. Like we said, native speech is fast, maybe 120, 150 words per minute, sometimes more. Your brain needs to perform that whole process, hear the sound, match it to a word in your lexicon, confirm the meaning incredibly quickly. If your lexical retrieval is just a fraction too slow, you start lagging behind. By the time you've processed word number 1, the speaker is already on word number 3 or 4.
Creating a backlog.
A constant backlog. You're always playing catch up, and inevitably words get missed in the process. This really highlights the difference between passive vocabulary words you recognize when you read them slowly and active, rapidly accessible vocabulary needed for listening.
That's a useful distinction, passive versus active.
And one last thing in this area, collocations. These are words that naturally tend to go together.
Like heavy rain, not strong rain. Or make a decision, not do a decision.
Exactly. Native speakers have an intuitive feel for these pairings. While hearing strong rain might not completely break comprehension, it sounds slightly off. That slight offness can cause a tiny mental stumble, a moment of, wait, did I hear that right? It adds a small cognitive load. If you haven't learned vocabulary in these common chunks or collocations, understanding can be less smooth, less automatic, potentially leading to missed nuances or slight delays.
All right, so we've tackled sounds and word meanings, but you're saying even if we nail those, the way sentences are built can still throw us off. The structure itself.
Absolutely. Welcome to the grammar gauntlet. Sometimes the problem isn't the individual words, but how they're arranged. A major culprit here is complex sentence structures. We're talking long sentences with lots of clauses embedded within them.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine hearing this. The report, which my colleague submitted late yesterday after arguing with the data team, unfortunately contains several inaccuracies that we only discovered this morning.
Okay, yeah, that's a mouthful.
It is. Look how much information is stuffed between the main subject, the report, and the main verb, contained. You have one embedded clause, then another bit of information. By the time you get to contained, your working memory might be struggling to hold on to the report. You lose the connection.
So your brain is trying to juggle all these side clauses.
Exactly. It's holding them in suspension, waiting to connect them back to the main idea. And for a non-native listener who's already working harder on sounds and words, this extra grammatical load can be overwhelming. Working memory just overflows. The beginning of the sentence might literally fade from conscious awareness before you reach the end, making it feel like words were missed. Long distances between subject and verb are a classic challenge.
And what about when the structure isn't the standard subject-verb-object order?
Right, structural deviations. The passive voice is a prime example. The decision was made by the committee. It flips the expected order. Instead of agent-action-recipient, it's often recipient-action by agent. This forces your brain to pause and reparse. Okay, who did what to whom? That brief pause can cause you to miss what comes next.
So it disrupts the flow.
It does, and so do inversions, where the typical word order is deliberately changed, often for emphasis.
Like, never have I seen such a mess.
Exactly. Or, not only did she finish the project, but she also won an award. The standard subject-verb order is flipped. Have I seen? Did she finish? This can be disorienting. It forces a quick mental recalculation of the grammar, and during that recalculation, you might miss the next few words.
And sometimes the words we think are missing aren't actually missing. They were just never said.
That's implicit grammar, or ellipsis. Native speakers do this constantly. We leave out words that are clearly implied by the context. If someone asks, who wants coffee? You don't usually say, I want coffee, you just say, I do. The want coffee is ellipsed, left out.
But a learner might be listening for the full grammatical structure.
They might, and when they don't hear want coffee, they might perceive it as a missing piece, leading to confusion, even though the meaning was perfectly clear to a native speaker. They expect explicitness.
And finally, in spoken language, we don't have commas or periods to guide us.
That's a huge difference from reading. The absence of punctuation. In speech, we rely entirely on prosody. The rhythm, the pauses, the intonation, the pitch changes to signal where clauses begin and end and how ideas relate.
Like a slight pause instead of a comma.
Right, or a rising intonation for a question. If you misinterpret these subtle auditory cues, maybe you don't notice a slight pause indicating a clause break. You might link ideas together incorrectly. You might misunderstand the whole structure of the thought because you missed the spoken punctuation.
Okay, this is bringing up a really important question for me. We've talked about the complexities of English sounds, words, grammar, but how much of this is just about our brain hitting its limits, the sheer cognitive load?
That's a massive factor. We're now entering the territory of cognitive bottlenecks. It's often less about the language itself and more about our brain's finite processing power. Think about working memory limits. Working memory isn't like a huge hard drive. It's more like your computer's RAM. It's a limited space where you actively juggle information right now.
Okay. Small, active workspace.
Exactly. And when complex information like fast, unfamiliar English pours in relentlessly, that workspace just gets overloaded. Information gets pushed out before it's fully processed or linked to long-term memory.
Is that why sometimes you hear the start of a long sentence, but by the end, you've completely forgotten how it began?
That's precisely it. The earlier words literally vanish from your active working memory because new information crowded them out. They were missed because the system overloaded. Tied closely to this is processing speed lag. All those steps we talked about, acoustic analysis, finding the word, parsing the grammar, they all take time. Milliseconds, but time nonetheless. If your overall processing speed for English is slower than the speaker's delivery rate, say, they're speaking at 140 words per minute, but you can only process comfortably at 110, you're inevitably going to fall behind.
Like watching a video that's buffering.
Kind of. You're constantly trying to catch up. Words get missed simply because your brain doesn't have that tiny fraction of a second needed to fully engage with them before the next one arrives. There's just no time.
And stress. I imagine that throws a huge wrench in the works.
Oh, massively. We can call it the cognitive tax from stress. When you're feeling anxious, maybe worried about understanding, or afraid of making mistakes, your brain actually diverts resources. Stress hormones effectively shrink your available working memory capacity. It's like trying to run complex software on a computer that suddenly has half the RAM available.
So the worry itself eats up the brain power needed for listening.
Exactly. That internal monologue of worry, am I getting this? What if I don't understand? Directly competes with the incoming speech signal. It significantly increases the likelihood of missing words.
Wow. Okay, and then there's the big one. The habit that so many learners, myself included sometimes, fall into.
Ah, yes, the translation habit. This is perhaps the ultimate cognitive bottleneck for many.
Explain that. How does translating in your head cause missed words?
Well, think about the process. You hear the English words. Your brain sends them to your native language, L1, for translation. You process the meaning in L1. You maybe formulate a response or understanding in L1. Then you translate that back into English. It's this multi-step, indirect route. And it is incredibly slow and mentally taxing compared to processing directly in English.
So while you're busy doing that translation loop for sentence 1,
the speaker is already well into sentence 2 or 3. You're perpetually lagging behind, stuck processing the past instead of listening to the present.
you're essentially deaf to the current words because your brain is occupied elsewhere.
Precisely. It creates this chronic backlog. You miss words not because you didn't hear them, but because your cognitive resources were completely tied up in the translation detour. Breaking this habit and learning to think directly in English is fundamental for fluency and real-time comprehension.
Okay, let's shift perspective a bit. We've looked deep inside the listening process, sounds, words, grammar, cognitive limits. But sometimes the problem isn't internal, it's external. It's about the context surrounding the words.
Absolutely. Even if the sounds are clear, the words known, the grammar simple, and your brain isn't overloaded, you can still miss the meaning or feel like you've missed words due to contextual and pragmatic challenges. A big one is simply lack of background knowledge. Listening isn't just decoding sounds, it's integrating those sounds with what you already know about the world or about the specific topic being discussed. If someone starts talking using technical jargon you don't know, or referencing cultural events you're unaware of, or historical figures you haven't heard of, the words might be simple, but they don't connect to anything.
They don't land anywhere.
Exactly. They lack a framework, a schema for interpretation. Your brain struggles to see the relevance, to predict what might come next. This can lead to you either tuning out because it feels overwhelming, or getting bogged down trying to process every single detail because you can't distinguish the important from the unimportant.
So not knowing the topic well enough can make it feel like you're missing words.
It really can. It increases the overall cognitive load significantly. And sometimes the problem is more straightforward. It's the speaker themselves. speaker delivery issues.
Like someone who mumbles or talks way too fast.
Exactly. Poor articulation, a very heavy accent you're unfamiliar with, mumbling, or just an excessively fast pace.
Oh.
All these force your brain to work much, much harder just at the basic level of identifying the sounds and segmenting the words.
It drains your mental battery just trying to get the signal.
Precisely. That extra effort leads to rapid listening fatigue, which we'll talk more about, making you much more likely to miss words as the conversation goes on. The signal quality really matters.
And there are the unwritten rules. The cultural stuff.
Yes. The cultural and social norms, the pragmatics. Misinterpreting these can definitely lead to feeling like you missed something crucial. Think about indirectness. In some cultures, a request is very direct. Please do X. In many English-speaking contexts, especially professional ones, it might be phrased much more softly. Perhaps we could consider doing X, or it might be helpful if X was done.
And if you're expecting a direct command,
you might miss the request entirely. You heard the words, but you missed their function, their pragmatic intent. It feels like a communication gap. Like a word was missing that would have made it a clear instruction.
Sarcasm and humor fit in here too.
Definitely. If you miss the sarcastic tone, you take the literal meaning, which is completely wrong. Understanding implied meaning, politeness strategies, turn-taking cues, these are all pragmatic skills. Failing to grasp them can lead to significant misunderstandings.
And finally, our own minds can play tricks on us, right? Our biases.
Yes, listener biases act like filters. Confirmation bias is a key one here. If you strongly expect someone to say a particular thing or hold a particular view, your brain might actually filter the incoming sound to match your expectation.
So you literally hear what you expected to hear, not what was actually said.
It can happen. You might misinterpret words or genuinely not register words that contradict your pre-existing belief or expectation. This leads to an inaccurate understanding where you feel certain objective words were missed or misstated when it was actually your internal filter at work.
This brings us to something really crucial, I think, the internal state. We've covered language, cognition, context. But how much does our own mindset, our psychology, affect our ability to listen effectively?
It's huge. Often it's the biggest factor, especially for learners who have good technical skills but still struggle. This is the psychological dimension, and the number one enemy here is often performance anxiety. The fear of not understanding, the fear of looking stupid, the fear of having to ask, could you repeat that?
That feeling is horrible.
It is. And what does it lead to? Usually excessive self-monitoring. You stop focusing fully on the speaker and start focusing inwards. Your internal dialogue takes over. Am I getting this? Did I understand that last point? What if they ask me something? Oh no, I missed that bit.
And that inner chatter uses up brain power.
Precisely the brain power, the attention and working memory that you desperately need for actually listening and processing the incoming information.
So the anxiety creates the very problem you're afraid of.
It's a classic vicious cycle. Anxiety leads to distraction. Distraction leads to missed words. Missed words reinforces the anxiety. It's self-sabotage.
And just the sheer effort involved.
Yeah.
It must be exhausting, right? Trying to process a language that isn't your native one.
Absolutely. That leads to listening fatigue. Think about it. Every step we've discussed, filtering sounds, accessing words, parsing grammar, interpreting pragmatics, requires more conscious effort for a non-native listener than for a native speaker, for whom much of it is automatic. That constant, high-level cognitive work drains your mental energy much faster. Your mental battery runs low.
And when you're fatigued,
your attention wavers, your focus blurs, your working memory capacity decreases. You start missing words simply because your brain is too tired to keep up the intense processing effort required.
Which can then lead to just giving up, I suppose.
Yes, frustration and avoidance. If listening consistently feels like a struggle, if you constantly feel lost or fatigued, it's natural to become frustrated and demotivated. Sometimes learners reach a point where they just mentally check out in challenging situations. They might nod and smile, but they've stopped actively engaging, stopped putting in the effort needed to understand because it just feels too hard or too punishing.
That sounds like a really tough place to be.
It is. And that's why the last psychological piece is so important. Lack of self-compassion. Learners can be incredibly hard on themselves. I'm so bad at listening, I'll never get this. Why am I missing such simple words?
That negative self-talk.
Exactly. It just fuels the anxiety, keeps the stress levels high, and prevents learning. You need to be able to step back and say, okay, I missed that word. That's interesting. Why might that have happened? What can I learn from this?
Mm-hmm.
Embracing imperfection. Seeing missed words not as failures but as data points guiding your learning is absolutely key for maintaining motivation and making progress. You have to be kind to your learning brain.
Okay, we've done a deep dive into the problems, from sounds getting mangled to our brains overloading to anxiety getting in the way. We've diagnosed the issues. Now the crucial part, the solutions. Let's build that roadmap, that toolkit of strategies.
Right. We need targeted solutions for each challenge area. Let's start back with the sounds. Mastering phonology to deal with connected speech. One really powerful technique is shadowing. This means listening to a short piece of native audio and repeating it immediately, trying to mimic the speaker's rhythm, intonation, and pronunciation, including all the reductions and links.
So you're talking almost at the same time as the recording.
Almost simultaneously, yes. It forces your mouth and your ear to get used to the flow of natural speech, not just isolated words. It builds that physical and auditory intuition for how sounds blend together.
Okay, shadowing. What else for sounds?
Transcribing short segments. This can feel tedious, but it's incredibly effective. Take 30 seconds, maybe a minute of audio and try to write down every single sound you hear. It forces you to pay hyper attention to those weak forms, those dropped sounds, those little words that usually fly under the radar. You'll start noticing the N's that sound like N, the F's that sound like...
Makes you confront the reality of spoken English.
Exactly. And of course, exposure to diverse accents. Don't just listen to one type of English. Seek out speakers from the UK, Australia, India, Ireland, different parts of the US. The more accents you expose your ear to, the more flexible your auditory processing becomes.
Okay, so train the ear for sounds. What about building up that vocabulary strength, dealing with ambiguity and retrieval speed?
For building lexical strength, prioritize. Focus on high-frequency vocabulary first, the words that make up the bulk of everyday conversation. Don't get bogged down in obscure words initially. And crucially, learn vocabulary in context and chunks. Don't just memorize word lists. Learn words as part of common phrases or collocations. Learn make a decision, heavy rain, keen interest.
Why chunks?
Because your brain then retrieves the whole chunk as one unit, which is much faster than retrieving individual words and assembling them. It dramatically speeds up your retrieval process. Using spaced repetition systems, SRS, like Anki or Memrise, can really help automate the recall of these chunks.
Got it. Learn high-frequency words and common phrases. Now, what about tackling that tricky grammar, those complex sentences?
Here, conscious analysis helps. Analyze transcripts of spoken English. Find examples of those long sentences with embedded clauses, passive voice, inversions. Read them, listen to the audio simultaneously, and notice how the speaker uses pauses and intonation to mark the structure.
So, connect the written structure to the spoken cues.
Yes. And then practice with focused listening sessions. Maybe for 10 minutes, your only goal is to identify the main subject and verb in every sentence you hear. Or focus specifically on listening for prepositions. Break down the task.
Okay, makes sense. And for optimizing the brain itself, reducing that cognitive overload.
To optimize cognitive processing, work on your focus and stress management. Practices like mindfulness or meditation have been shown to strengthen attention networks and help manage the cognitive drain from anxiety.
So calming the mind helps listening.
Significantly. Also, be strategic. Use pre-listening preparation. If you know the topic of a meeting or lecture, do a little reading beforehand. Look up key terms. This provides background knowledge, reducing the amount of completely new information your brain has to process in real time. It lowers the cognitive load.
Gives your brain some hooks to hang the new information on.
Exactly. And the biggest cognitive shift. Consciously practice thinking in English. Try to narrate your day internally in English, formulate opinions directly in English, stop yourself when you catch your brain defaulting to that L1 translation step.
Bypass the translation habit altogether.
It's the most direct route to faster processing and freeing up cognitive resources. It takes effort, but it pays off massively.
Finally, cultivating that mental resilience. Dealing with the inner game.
Yes, cultivating resilience, mindset, first and foremost. Embrace imperfection. You will miss words. Everyone does, even native speakers sometimes. See it as feedback, not failure.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It is, but it's crucial. And when you do miss a word, don't get stuck on it. Focus on the main meaning. Try to infer from the context. And critically, keep listening. Don't mentally rewind and try to figure out the missed word, because then you'll definitely miss the next words. Keep the flow going.
Stay with the speaker.
Stay with the speaker. And be proactive. Use active listening strategies. Learn to politely ask for clarification. Sorry, could you say that last part again? Or, What did you mean by specific phrase? Or even paraphrasing. So if I understand correctly, you're saying?
It's not a sign of weakness, it's engagement.
Exactly. It shows you're invested. And finally, manage that fatigue. Recognize when your brain is tired. Take breaks. Maybe shorter, more focused listening practice sessions are better than one long, exhausting one. Be strategic about your energy. Hashtag outro. So just to wrap up, that feeling of missing words, it's normal. It really is. It comes from this complex interplay between the tricky nature of spoken English and the very real limits of our human brains. But the path to clarity isn't magic. It's about understanding these specific challenges and then applying targeted strategies diligently. It's a holistic thing. You need the linguistic knowledge, the cognitive training, and that psychological self-awareness and resilience.
Yeah, and I think the shift is moving from seeing it as this constant frustration, this skip button you can't control, to seeing it as a series of identifiable issues you can tackle. Every time you notice a reduction or figure out an idiom from context or manage your anxiety enough to ask for clarification, you're actively strengthening those pathways in your brain. You're training yourself. The words are out there. You're just building the skills to catch them all. So we really hope this deep dive has given you some powerful insights and practical tools. We encourage you to start applying these strategies today. At the end of this episode, must mention like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.